What if I told you that having absolutely perfect, like flawless English grammar might actually be the exact thing holding your career back?
I mean, it sounds totally counterintuitive.
Right. But I want you, the listener, to picture sitting across from a colleague, grabbing a coffee, and they are speaking to you in 100% grammatically pristine English.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Every single rule followed, every word chosen with like absolute precision. But as you're listening, the hairs on your arms stand up a little bit.
Yeah, because it feels off.
Exactly. The language is flawless, but it feels stiff.
Hmm.
It feels distant, almost like you're receiving a formal business letter right in the middle of a casual chat.
It creates this sort of a uncanny valley of communication. You hear the words and intellectually you know they're correct, but you don't feel the human behind them. The friction in that interaction is palpable.
Okay, let's unpack this because there's a massive irony here. This over-formality problem actually affects advanced English learners way more than beginners.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
100%.
Because beginners are out there just trying to survive the language, right? Just stringing basic rules together. But advanced speakers,
Yeah.
you know the rules so incredibly well that you forget the single most important detail about fluent native speakers.
Which is that we break those rules constantly.
Constantly.
We don't just break them, we actively rely on breaking them to build social trust. Real daily communication operates by entirely different psychological conventions than textbook English.
Because textbooks teach you how to pass an exam.
Right. But passing an exam and actually connecting with another human being, those require two totally different toolkits.
Which is our entire mission for this deep dive today.
Mhm.
We're going to explore 12 specific shifts that transform your language from sounding like a perfectly graded exam paper into sounding like a real human being.
I love that. And that foundational layer of real breathing language starts with something most people dismiss as lazy speech, which is contractions.
Yes.
Yes.
Using contractions isn't lazy. It's like mandatory for natural speech.
It really is. It's a huge misconception that they're just a sloppy way of talking. What's fascinating here is the psychological effect of actively avoiding them.
Right, like when you over-enunciate.
Exactly. When you take the time to enunciate the full forms of words in a casual conversation, you're acoustically building a wall. It signals to the listener's brain that you are being overly careful or guarded, and it can actually come across as cold or even reprimanding.
That makes a lot of sense. Like if someone says to me, I do not want to go, it feels like a parent scolding a child.
Yeah, a bit intense.
But if they say, I don't want to go, it's just a friend expressing a preference. It completely shifts the power dynamic.
Precisely. That's why I am needs to soften into I'm. The formal I would becomes a much more, collaborative I will drops to out.
Yeah.
And the negative ones carry the most emotional weight, like we just said. I cannot feels like a brick wall, whereas I can't is like an invitation to find an alternative. Right. And this works across the board. It
Yeah.
is becomes it's we are shrinks down to we're, and they have naturally drops to they.
So the rule of thumb here is basically, unless you're drafting a binding legal contract or, I don't know, defending an academic thesis, always use the contraction.
Always. It's the fastest way to add acoustic warmth to your voice. But fixing the acoustic distance isn't really enough if the actual vocabulary you're choosing is fundamentally mismatched to the room.
Right. Which brings up an analogy I was thinking about earlier. Using highly formal words in a casual setting is kind of like wearing a tuxedo to a backyard barbecue.
Oh, that's a perfect way to describe it.
Right. You're wearing this incredibly high-quality, precise outfit, but for a super low-key environment, just makes everyone else uncomfortable.
Because the social calibration is off. Native speakers pick up on that mismatch immediately.
So let's look at some of those friction points. If I'm writing an email to a colleague I've known for 2 years, and I say, I require assistance, they might wonder if my account got hacked.
Yeah, a natural speaker just says, I need some help.
Exactly. Or the classic sign-off, please do not hesitate to contact me.
Ugh, that sounds like an automated customer service reply. The human version is just, feel free to reach out.
And acknowledging a message. Saying, I am in receipt of your message, sounds like I'm the executor of an estate.
Right, reading a will.
Yeah, got your message, does the exact same job without all that armor.
Mm.
Or replacing subsequently we proceeded with, then we move forward.
Agreement is another huge area where people overcomplicate things. You don't need to say, I concur with your assessment. Just say, I agree with you.
Deadlines too. At your earliest convenience, puts this weird passive-aggressive pressure on the person. Whenever you get a chance, removes that pressure entirely.
It's so much warmer.
And finally, replacing "I wish to express my gratitude" with a genuine "thanks so much." But wait, let me push back on this for a
Go
second.
for it.
If I deliberately strip out these advanced multisyllable words and replace them with simpler phrasing, doesn't that make me sound less intelligent? Like my vocabulary is just limited?
I hear that concern all the time, but the underlying assumption there is totally flawed.
How so?
Because intelligence in human communication isn't about hoarding the biggest words, it's about social intelligence. Highly educated native speakers use casual language in casual contexts because it shows high-level situational awareness.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, when you use simple words in a low-stakes environment, you aren't showing a lack of vocabulary, you're showing that you understand the social rules of the room.
Okay, so we've softened the vocabulary. But there's another dead giveaway of textbook English, which is the silence between the words.
Right. Native speakers absolutely hate dead air in a conversation.
Which brings us to shift 3.
Yeah.
Filler phrases. Now, I normally try to avoid filler because public speaking coaches tell you they're terrible.
Well, they get a terrible reputation in formal speeches, sure. But in interpersonal communication, completely omitting filler phrases makes you sound unnervingly precise.
Like a robot.
Exactly, like a
Uh,
synthesized voice assistant. Because humans have brain-to-mouth latency, we have to think about what we're going to say while we're actually saying it.
So we use these tiny linguistic cushions to buy processing time.
Yes, and to signal emotional states, and to keep the rhythm of the conversation flowing so we don't give up our turn to speak.
Let's dissect a few of these because they all serve totally different purposes. Like saying "you know" isn't just filler, it signals a shared understanding with the listener.
Right, you're pulling them onto your side. And I mean, shows that you're actively clarifying a point or adding nuance in real time.
Then there's hedging, which is critical for psychological safety. Dropping in a kind of or sort of softens a statement so it doesn't land like an aggressive demand.
And we can't ignore like, which is just the ultimate conversational glue, especially in informal American English.
Oh, for sure. And then you have markers that signal your intent. Actually, prepares a listener for a slight correction, basically is an empathy marker. It tells them you're about to simplify a complex explanation for them.
Honestly, signals candor. And, to be fair, shows you're actively considering a balanced perspective.
But the trick here, I imagine, is dosage.
Dosage is everything. They are spices, not the main course. If you use one or two in a conversation, you sound wonderfully human, but if you sprinkle them into every single sentence, you just sound unprepared.
Right, right. So once you have that rhythm down, you need to know how to pass the conversational ball back to the other person. Which brings us to shift 4, question tags.
This is essentially a verbal handshake. It's taking a statement of fact and turning it into an invitation to connect.
And textbooks occasionally mention these, but I feel like learners rarely deploy them in the wild.
No, they don't. A question tag is just a mini question tacked onto the end of a sentence. For instance, nice day, isn't it?
Or checking shared history. You've met James before, haven't you?
Or looking for consensus on an event. That went well, didn't it? Or even confirming a plan. You're coming to the meeting, aren't you?
I know these are a massive staple in British English,
Yeah.
but we use them constantly in American English too. Why do they work so well?
Because they lower the listener's defenses. You aren't just broadcasting information at them, you're signaling, hey, I'm interested in your perspective.
You're giving them a low-stakes prompt to agree with you.
Exactly. And that quietly builds a pattern of microagreements that warms up the entire interaction.
And that concept of warmth connects directly to how we actually construct our verbs, which is shift 5. Because formal English loves massive, strict verbs.
Oh, yes, it does.
But natural English runs on something entirely different. Let's talk about phrasal verbs.
The history here is actually the key to understanding why native speakers prefer them. Many of those formal single-word verbs like investigate or comprehend are Latin-based.
Brought in by academics in the legal system centuries ago, right?
Exactly. But phrasal verbs, which is a verb paired with a preposition like look into, those are deeply rooted in Old Anglo-Saxon. They are the earthy, grounded language of the common people.
So when I use a phrasal verb, I'm subconsciously grounding my speech in something that feels more physical and real.
That is the exact mechanism. Let's look at how that plays out. Instead of asking someone to submit a report,
Which sounds like a surrender of documents, by the way.
Right. You ask them to hand in their report. It's physical. It's tactile.
And you don't investigate an issue, you look into it. If someone asks me a question, I won't say, I will contact you tomorrow. That sounds like a subpoena. I'll say, I'll get back to you.
Deadlines aren't postponed. They're pushed back. A project doesn't just continue. You tell your team to go ahead. When you're making a decision, you don't consider it in a vacuum. You think over the options.
If an event is ruined, it wasn't canceled, it was called off. And this last one is my absolute favorite. If I tell a client to tolerate a delay, it sounds like an imperial command.
Yeah, very rigid.
But if I ask them to bear with me, it transforms the delay from a demand into like an appeal to a teammate.
Phrasal verbs are the lifeblood of that teamwork dynamic. And that same need for a casual, organic feel applies to shift 6, how we initiate our sentences.
Right, informal sentence starters.
Because if you start a sentence in the break room with "in conclusion" or "furthermore," people are going to assume you're reading off an invisible teleprompter.
Because those are writing tools, and writing has no latency. Real conversation requires starters that sound like you're thinking in real time.
Exactly. You want to use phrases like "thing is" instead of "the core issue to be addressed is."
Or trouble is. Funny thing,
Yeah.
Good news is.
Honestly, though, is a brilliant way to pivot into a candid opinion. And here's the thing, commands attention, because it implies you've just synthesized a complex thought and are about to share the bottom line.
You also need quick conversational acknowledgments like fair enough or fair point. And to show contrast, replacing a rigid however with that said or even so keeps the momentum going.
Absolutely.
You know, all of these shifts we've talked about so far, the contractions, the phrasal verbs, the fillers, they perfectly explain the story of Carlos from our research.
Oh, Carlos's story is the perfect example of this.
Yeah. So Carlos was a professional whose English was universally praised as precise and perfect. But he noticed that whenever he was in casual situations, his colleagues acted incredibly stiff around him.
Because they were unconsciously mirroring his linguistic armor, the environment responds to the energy you put into it.
Exactly. So Carlos ran an experiment. He deliberately started swapping I am for I'm. He dropped investigate for, look into it. He stopped issuing formal opinions and started his sentences with, here's the thing.
And what happened?
A few weeks later, at his next one-on-one, his manager pulled him aside and noted that he seemed much more relaxed lately.
Wow.
Yeah. So Carlos chuckles and says, I'm just working on my English. And his manager was completely confused and said, but your English has always been perfect.
And Carlos's realization here is the thesis of this entire deep dive.
Right. Carlos looked at him and said, that was kind of the problem. Perfect English doesn't leave room for the messy, collaborative reality of human interaction.
It really doesn't. Which brings us to part 4 and how we actually react to others in real-term conversations. Shift 7, short responses.
Because it is physically exhausting to constantly reply to people with full formal affirmations like, yes, I understand and I agree with your perspective.
It acts as a massive speed bump in the dialogue. Natural English relies heavily on rapid-fire short responses. Their entire purpose is to validate the speaker and build momentum without forcing them to stop.
We're talking about those quick bursts of validation. For sure. Absolutely. Totally.
Defense. Fair enough. Sounds good.
Or keeping it breezy with, no worries, got it, right. Or a genuine, oh, wow, to show surprise. Yeah. They're tiny green lights telling the speaker to just keep driving.
And maintaining that forward momentum is never more crucial than when things go wrong in a professional setting. Which brings us to shift 8.
Talking about problems casually.
Right. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is a subtle but vital shift. If you use highly formal textbook vocabulary to describe a setback, you inadvertently sound the alarm.
Wait, let me push back on this, though. If a project is falling apart and I tell my boss, things got a bit hairy, instead of, we are facing a systemic failure, aren't I downplaying a real crisis?
It's a totally valid concern.
Doesn't that make me look incompetent?
Actually, psychologically, it does the exact opposite. Native speakers discuss challenges with casual resilience, specifically to avoid catastrophizing.
Okay, how does that work?
When you use intense, formal language for a problem, it signals panic. It sounds like the problem is in control of you, but when you use casual idioms, it signals that you are a calm captain on a sinking ship.
So you're taking the emotional temperature of the room down.
Exactly. You are acknowledging the reality, but framing your relationship to it. Instead of announcing a critical failure, you say, it's a bit of a mess.
Or things got complicated.
It went sideways. We hit a snag. It got a bit hairy.
Things fell through. Or adding some candor, like, it's been a bit of a nightmare, honestly. Or simply, we ran into some issues, and it didn't quite go to plan.
It shows you have your hands on the steering wheel, even if the car is currently off the road.
That makes a lot of sense. And once you've navigated the problem, you inevitably have to navigate differing viewpoints on how to fix it, which leads to shift 9, natural opinions.
Because delivering a formal opinion, like in my professional assessment, sounds like a royal decree. It just shuts down collaboration.
Right. Natural opinions sound like you are figuring it out alongside the other person. You're inviting them into the kitchen while you cook the idea.
Yes. You use phrases like, if you ask me, or the great UK favorite, I reckon.
My gut says, is fantastic for offering an instinct without claiming it as absolute fact. You can use I'd say the way I see it, personally.
Or if you really want to build an inner circle of trust, starting with between us.
Now, once those ideas are on the table, conflict is, inevitable. Shift 10 is agreeing and disagreeing. And let me tell you, saying I respectfully disagree in a casual meeting is like throwing a bucket of ice water over the table.
It really is. It is so intensely confrontational under the guise of politeness.
Because it offers zero psychological safety. To disagree naturally, you first have to master natural agreement. You don't just say yes. You say exactly or precisely or that's exactly it.
Validate them with, you're not wrong, or 100%, that tracks, right, or I was just thinking that.
And when you do have to disagree, the mechanism is soft pushback. You must validate their reality before introducing yours. I see where you're coming from, but
I'm not sure about that.
I'm not totally convinced, or that's an interesting take, I'd push back a little. Or the very simple, I get that, but...
It creates a buffer. You are attacking the idea, but protecting the relationship, which naturally requires transitions to move between these opposing ideas. Shift 11.
Transition phrases.
Formal transitions are rigid hinges. Words like furthermore, moreover, in addition, subsequently, and nevertheless.
They scream that you are reading an essay aloud.
Right. We want organic hinges, so we swap those out. Furthermore becomes and also, or plus, or on top of that.
And nevertheless transforms into that said, even so, then again, or at the same time.
Having said that, or either way, they connect thoughts without making the listener feel like they are being lectured.
So what does this all mean? If natural, casual English is so incredible for building trust, should we just burn our grammar textbooks? Is formal English completely dead?
Not at all. And assuming it is can be just as damaging as always being formal. This is our final point. Shift 12. Read the room. Context is king.
The goal isn't to be casual 100% of the time.
Exactly. The ultimate goal of fluency is having range. You have to be able to match your register to the specific environment.
Okay, so when do we actually engage that high-level formal gear?
You preserve it for environments with explicit formal conventions. Written reports, official company documents, or formal presentations to senior external stakeholders.
Legal and financial communications too, probably.
Absolutely. Or your very first contact with a senior figure you don't know.
But the moment you move out of those rigid zones, you downshift. Day-to-day workplace chats, emails with known colleagues, networking events, internal team syncs.
Anytime human warmth and relationship building matter just as much as raw professionalism, you use the natural toolkit.
Which brings us perfectly to the story of Yuki. Yuki's experience really illustrates the power of mastering this gear shift.
She is a great case study.
She really is. So Yuki had been praised for her flawless English since she was like 13 years old. But when she relocated to London for work, she noticed she was constantly getting these surprised, slightly jarring looks from native speakers.
Because her accuracy was incredible, but it was creating that uncanny valley effect in casual settings. She was stuck in the formal gear.
Right. So she decided to actively mirror the environment. She consciously deployed contractions. She forced herself to use Anglo-Saxon phrasal verbs instead of Latin ones.
She replaced I understand with got it and swapped out the issue that needs to be addressed is for a simple thing is.
She adapted her register to the room, and the payoff was incredible. 3 months into this experiment, she was at a work social event, and a colleague she barely knew remarked that she seemed more yourself lately.
Oh, I love this part.
Right. In the past, Yuki's automated textbook response would have been, "Thank you for that observation." But instead, she instinctively used her new toolkit. She smiled and said, "Honestly, I've been working on sounding less like a textbook.
And her colleague laughed and replied, well, it's working.
Exactly.
That moment right there is the pinnacle of language learning. She used language not to transmit data, but to share a genuine piece of her humanity.
So, for you listening right now, we've covered a massive amount of psychological and linguistic ground today in this deep dive. Here is your actionable advice from the source material.
Don't try to implement all 12 of these shifts tomorrow.
No, do not do that. You will completely overwhelm your brain's processing power. Pick 3 to practice this week.
Maybe start with contractions, dropping I am for I'm, add in a few phrasal verbs, and try using here's the thing in a meeting. Once they become muscle memory, come back and add 3 more.
Because the objective isn't to sound careless.
No, the goal is to sound human. A perfect blend of being correct yet human, precise yet warm.
I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder today, something that really builds on everything we've talked about. Think back to that unsettling image we started with, handing someone a stiff, typed-up business letter right in the middle of a relaxed coffee chat.
Right.
If the language you choose is how you project your personality out into the world, what parts of your true, authentic, hilarious, or brilliant self are currently trapped behind a wall of perfect textbook grammar, just waiting for permission to finally step out into the real world?